This is a 1920s death ray that I built in my backyard, and today I'm going to find out if it can actually ignite gunpowder, knock a person out, or even destroy a city. So the year was World War I, and the British military were really starting to feel a bit threatened by all the new types of pigeons and party balloons the Germans were sending their way, and they wanted a solution. So who stepped up to the challenge of solving this threat for them? A bloke named Harry Grindle Matthews, by building the death ray. So Harry had already created a few inventions. Unfortunately, some of them had already been invented years before, but he still got the attention of the English War Office, probably because his versions were the first to show up on their For You page. He did actually manage to sell them one invention for £25,000, which utilised a high-powered light and receivers to remote control a boat, which for some reason they never implemented. He then moved on to his infamous death ray. Once he had a prototype, despite wanting to sell the concept, he wouldn't demonstrate it in front of any experts and would only give brief demos in his lab to a couple of very select officials and the press. The media frothed over him, writing glowing reviews about his demonstrations. The English government finally started to wave a check in front of him if he would give them a proper demo with a provided target. He refused and instead made a promo film about the device. After seeing the film, the government officials said the device looked nothing like the original prototype they'd been shown, and was starting to suspect that this guy was a little bit dodgy. After that, any future inquiries he got, he basically said the device was sold pending pickup, and he moved on to other projects, and to this day, no one actually knows how or if his death ray actually worked. But based on everything I've read about his demonstrations, the fact that all of his other creations were based on bright lights, and given the time period, I'm pretty convinced he built a carbon arc lamp with a touch of theatrics to fool his select audience. So let's see if we can build a similar death ray and replicate some of his demonstrations. Thank you to our sponsor EcoFlow for supporting this video. The first thing we're going to need is some carbon. The easiest way to get this is just by exhaling into your hands. However, this is carbon dioxide, and being a gas, it's a bit useless for our project. So we're going to use carbon that's in a solid graphite form. One option to source this is to use some pencils, but these are skinny and coated in trees. So I'm going to use some old carbon zinc dry cell batteries. You can carefully peel these open, or you can just crush them in a vise like I'm doing. Once the top has been crushed away, you can already start to see a nicely sized carbon electrode in there. After a little bit of digging and crushing, you can then use a pair of pliers to pull it out. We're going to need 2 of these carbon electrodes for our death ray, and probably a bunch of spares as well. I wiped most of the manganese dioxide off, more commonly referred to as battery shit, but then there's also a coating of some kind of wax on them. I think it's paraffin wax maybe, but I've had to burn this off with a blowtorch. Now we have our carbon rods, let's just start with a basic setup as a proof of concept. To power our death ray, I really didn't want to have to build my own power supply for it. So I'm really hoping that just my big old banger MIG welder will do the job straight up, as I figure it's a big box of electricity and it has all kinds of knobs on the front for doing things, as well as holes from, I'm guessing, some kind of welding issue induced rage by its previous owner. I've chucked one of the carbon rods in the welder's work clamp, which was nice and easy. And then for the other carbon rod, I've taken the front off the torch and then used an old hose clamp from my car. Then inside the welder, I've switched off the wire feed so it doesn't vomit out wire while we're testing this. With the electrodes clamped in place and running a fairly low voltage setting, I gave it a bit of a test. Now carbon arc lamps work by the electrodes first being struck together, then separated to make a gap. The arc then forms in the gap, heats up the carbon to crazy high temperatures, which vaporizes it and creates insane amounts of light. This was actually the first type of electric street lighting invented. Prior to this, people would just aimlessly wander around in the dark, bumping into shit. However, compared to other light sources, they spew out huge amounts of ultraviolet. There's UVA, B, C, pretty much the whole UV gang and all their mates, even compared to sunlight. That's why, a while after these lights were invented, they realised they had to enclose them in glass because I guess people were getting crazy amounts of sunburn and sore eyes from it. But that's also why, when doing this, you want to be well covered up. But after a fair bit of experimenting, I was pretty satisfied that the old MIG welder and these carbon electrodes would be the perfect basis for our 1920s death ray. We now just need a reliable way to strike it and target this setup. First up, we're going to need some holders for our carbon rods. I couldn't find any tubes anywhere in my shed or house that was the right size, but then I noticed the steering tube on my neighbour's boat was the perfect size. Once I removed this, I cut off 2 pieces for the carbons. I drilled a hole in the side and tapped in a bolt to tighten down on the rod. So my plan is that these two rods will move together with a scissor-like action. To adjust the spark gap between the two carbon electrodes, I'm going to somehow use this knob from an old foosball table. Then the torsion spring from my old castration clamp will be perfect to keep the rods separated. Obviously, because this is all made of metal, it's going to be just one giant short circuit. So to insulate these arms from the rest of the death ray, I'm going to use small sections of fiberglass I also cut out of my neighbour's boat. He still has heaps left, so I'm sure it's fine. Then it was time to get everything cut to shape and welded together. I almost instantly melted holes in the carbon holder tube, so I had to make some new ones up. The fiberglass insulators bolted on nicely and will allow a little bit of adjustment for the positions of the rods when I likely don't get my weld straight. I welded some metal tabs on to act as a hinge for the scissor action of the electrodes. Now the plan is that the spring will not only keep the gap between the carbon electrodes, but will also allow me to quickly push the gap closed for the initial striking of the device, to get the lightning arc started between the two carbons. Crap, I've just realised these are meant to be on the back, because the spring goes the other way. After I fixed that stuff up, I made this nut job for the adjustment knob, which will press against the back of this tube. To serve as a handle to strike the electrodes together, I've got this handle from the floodlights that served in my original cat video. It's crazy, I've used so many parts from those lights. I could then do the final assembly. I attached the striking handle, attached the electrode arms, put the hinge bolt in and spring, tightened it up to a comfortable level, and then gave it a bit of a movement test. That's working pretty good. I'm really happy with the foosball table adjustment knob to get the gap right between the electrodes, and because they get burnt up as you use it. And then the striking handle allows you to smack the electrodes together to summons the power of Thor. I put some fresh carbons in, and I'm pretty happy with this alignment, so I think we're almost ready to give this a bench test. However, I forgot there's no electricity in them yet, so we're going to have to drill some holes in these arms and attach some wires. The welder's work clamp was easy because I just unbolted it and bolted it straight on the arm, but to get power from the torch, just for now, I'm going to just wrap some wire around the end of the torch and use a scrote clamp to hold the trigger button on. We'll work out a nicer way of doing it later. And we can now give this a go. I've got the button pressed down and I'm seeing if I can bump start the arc. These electrodes are pretty dirty, so I've got the fan to eat their stink. A little bit of a fire, but I'm sure that's just how death rays work, especially if you want to impress the media. It's just on low voltage here, but it looks like it's doing the job. And then trying a slightly higher voltage, I got this nice result. It's like we've made our own little star in the back shed. Then as the carbon rods started to burn themselves into the right shape, it just kept getting brighter and brighter, and also scarier sounding. I could actually start to feel a fair amount of heat coming through my jumper, so it's now time to take this death ray to the next level and get the energy pointing in one direction. So we need some kind of reflector dish to focus it where we want, especially if we are planning to take out enemy aircraft and zeppelins and such. I considered getting the satellite dish off the roof and using that, but I think it's doing some kind of space shit or something, so it's probably important. Then I thought maybe my log collection display bowl would be perfect for the job. I figured I might as well use it because some bastard set fire to my collection. After I spread the ashes of my exquisite log collection, I then got to work cleaning up the steel bowl, which was a fairly unpleasant job, but it looks like this will do the job nicely. So to use this as a lens to focus the energy of our carbon arc death ray, we'll need to position the arc in the exact right spot in the middle. Basically, this will serve as a concave reflector, a bit like a spoon, or a concave reflector. So imagine this is our electric arc flame here, then this is our reflector. If we move the reflector forwards and backwards, it focuses the beam either near or far, or even just distracts you from the fact that the globe is setting the paper on fire. The best shape for this reflector would be a parabolic shape like this. However, looking at my log bowl, this one, not the ceramic one in the house, I think it's actually a spherical shape. A spherical reflector is still not too bad, but you can see that it doesn't quite focus perfectly in the middle. But it's all we have, so we'll just go with it. To work out the perfect focal position of the dish, I had to learn some new paper number stuff. So my plan is to have the focus adjustable anyway, so we can move between close targets and distant targets. I had to cut some generously sized holes in the back of the dish, And I tell you what, drawing squares the same size on a sphere is actually really difficult. See, I thought I had both of these squares the exact same size. I was wrong, because spheres are stupid. I just used a laser line in the end and gaffer taped it to the camera to get something that looked half respectable. I then cut the pieces out. So these scissor arms will go in like this, which will have to be positioned perfectly because if they touch the sides of the dish, it'll short the whole thing out. Once I got the position right, I drilled some holes in the backbone of the thing and used that to perfectly position two completely parallel rods, which is 100% not the case in reality. It took lots of re-welding and re-straightening and bending to get them parallel and vertical. I thought circles sucked to work with. Spheres are way worse, but once I did get it perfectly straight, this sliding in and out focusing idea seems to be working out really well, just with some slight persuasion every now and then. Then to operate this focus mechanism, I've used another foosball table knob attached to a long threaded rod. With that all working quite nicely, it was then just a case of making up a frame to hold the dish in place to allow the carbon arc lamp to tilt up, down and left and right. Then, as a stand to hold our death ray, I found this Mitsubishi Sigma flywheel growing in the garden, which will make a nice heavy base. For the stand, a piece of muffler tube with some bolts welded on the bottom will do nicely. And there we go, our death ray is almost complete. The carbon arc will be way too furious to look directly at, so to work out the optimal focus points, I've placed a small LED globe in the centre. With the battery charger hooked up to the electrode arms, I've powered it up to see how the focus looks from the front. It actually looks like a really cool vintage style lamp that I'm guessing my wife probably won't let me set up in the lounge room when I'm done with it. For a rusty steel bowl, this is actually way brighter than I expected, especially when you're right in the focal point. Now you're likely thinking that a rusty reflector is not going to do a good job at being a death ray, and I think you're probably right. So earlier I tested out a bit of Mylar reflective tape, and it seems to take the heat well. I tried a few test spots on the dish, which looked promising, but it did make me realise my focus was a bit out. Long story short, I f***ed this piece up because it's not long enough, and there's a big snot ball of weld there, which is hitting here. Damn it. While I made up a new focus rod, Kristen went to work laminating the dish with reflective tape. So I thought this would turn out pretty rough as a reflector, but this is actually looking way better than I thought it would. Cool thing is, we can still use this as a fire pit as well, just by doing that. I noticed with the dish, you also get all sorts of interesting sound reflections, which sound trippy. And you can hear stuff in the distance with it.
I currently got his head in a dish. He looks like a dog after surgery.
I found putting a Bluetooth speaker in the focal point was also pretty cool. Best to listen to this bit with headphones on. I then put the LED globe back in, and with Kristen's help, gave it a final focus test to engrave the distances on the back. I reckon this is how lighthouses were born, just a little warm flame with somebody's log collection display bowl behind it. With the focus sorted out, I also realised that this thing will also be great for capturing the sun and turning it into fire. The last thing to do for the build is just to wire it up more conveniently to the welder. I got rid of the wire, as we don't need that. I disconnected the wire feed motor, because that'll just waste power when we're out in the field. Then, to switch the death ray on, without needing to use the torch, I dug a hole in the front with a drill, planted some switch seeds, and then a couple of days later, a nice red toggle switch grew. I then attached the switch to where the torch was plugged in. I also made a nice chunky cable to attach to the terminal inside. I could then attach the death ray to the top of the welder with gravity. Looking at the final result, compared to Harry Grindle Matthews' film portrayal of his death ray, I feel like mine isn't sciencey looking enough to sell to military of the 1920s. So I wrapped it with a Mylar emergency blanket, which looks pretty stupid, but it's way more old school sciencey looking. Personally, I reckon his prop death ray looks like the Michelin Man ate a Dalek from Doctor Who. We're now ready to give it a test, so I've put the carbons back in place. But just before that, I'd like to give a quick thank you to everyone that subscribed over the years, as we've just cracked 300,000. Subbing and hitting the bell really does help the channel and enable me to make more videos like this. So old mate Harry claimed that the death ray actually knocked his assistant out when he accidentally stepped in front of it. Now, neither of us were too keen on sitting in front of the death ray with its ridiculous amount of unshielded ultraviolet radiation, but there was one bloke who stepped up to the challenge, and that's Tubesy, who you may remember from my anti-car theft device video. So we got it focused on him, and we gave it a go. Kristen was very enthusiastic to be involved in the testing of the death ray.
Should I move? I literally am scared.
Okay, step Yeah, step to the side a bit.
You're not making me feel less scared.
I haven't actually got a plan for if
I die?
No. It took me a fair while to get the hang of striking it and then listening for the sound feedback to get the perfect arc size, but I got there in the end. The camera looking back towards the death ray is a bit weird in colour because of the filters I've got stacked on the lens. And then with a higher voltage and a bit of adjustment, I managed to get a really good arc burning. Straight away you can see it is way brighter when you get the light focused all in one direction. It's actually way brighter than I thought it would be based on my earlier tests.
That doesn't sound good.
No. It also starts to become quite apparent that 100 years ago, an up-close and personal demonstration of something like this to the press would have been quite a spectacle. Just how bright it is and the dramatic sounds. Especially when your average person would just be used to using candles and lanterns indoors. Okay, switching it off. Now, obviously in the end, it didn't knock Tubesy out. Probably because he's made of fiberglass tubes. But he did get a lot warmer than I thought he would. So this could definitely be used as a practical hairdryer. Now Tubesy didn't give much feedback, but Harry Grindle Matthews also claims he lost sight in one of his eyes from using it. And I'd say that's a fair possibility. You don't really want to be looking down the focus barrel of this thing. After you do successfully strike it, you know you've got a good burn when it sounds like this. Now this shot was pretty hard to get through the lens of a welding mask, so I've colour corrected it the best that I could. But the flame of the carbon being vaporized is insanely bright. With a bit of a time lapse on this shot, you can actually see the carbon being burnt away. The bottom electrode slowly gets shorter, but it actually deposits some of itself on the top electrode, I noticed. I just thought that was kinda cool. Next, we are on to igniting gunpowder. Now, I think this would be very possible at close range, because the closer you get, the hotter it gets. But in his self-produced film portrayal of his experiment, he's implying that it's at about 5 meters or so, and the papers even claimed it was as far as 20 meters. However, in his film, the thing that rings alarm bells for me is that him and his assistants make a good point of showing that the gunpowder is on glass and elevating it with no wires attached. And I think this is what magicians make a point of doing, which I believe they call a convincer. Now, I don't have gunpowder, but let's try a bunch of matches. I've blackened the ends a little bit just so they'll soak up more heat. Plus we'll do it at closer range. Ooh, that's a weird noise.
If it can catch a light from scariness.
From sounds and flashing.
Yeah.
Then it's a weapon.
We're winning. Oh God.
Ooh.
Should we turn it off?
I haven't heard that sound before. Okay, let's have a look. Nothing. 42 degrees.
42 does not make fire.
Nah. So with our death ray, we didn't get close enough to a temperature that would have ignited gunpowder. But for his film demonstration, I'm pretty sure he just would have used wires anyway, as you wouldn't really see them from this camera angle. My guess is it was probably a bit like the setup we've got here, with some matches or similar, and a little bit of wire across them that heats up and ignites the whole pile. And the convenient thing is, it could even be connected up to the death ray itself, so that way the timing would be exactly right. Or just a clever cut in the footage at the exact right time, not showing a single frame before it ignites.
Hey!
Death ray, that's gonna stink. So how did he demonstrate this to people in person? Well, I have a bit of a theory on this, which would have been the perfect method of triggering all the effects in his demonstrations, like stopping motors, turning lights on, and setting off gunpowder. So like I mentioned, all of his previous inventions used bright lights, but the other thing he also used in almost all of his inventions, before and after the death ray, was selenium cells. So what the heck are selenium cells? So selenium cells were the first known type of photovoltaic cell. Basically, you shine a light at them and they produce a voltage. This vintage light meter actually has one inside and works without batteries, but it's similar to how this solar cell is turning this motor. But they were quite small, and if it was combined with a few other parts available at that time, like some dry cell batteries, it would be possible to hide something like this in the target of your demonstration. And coincidentally, it's almost the exact method that all of his other inventions used to work. Like the Spotlight remote controlled boat, his aerophone, and his later Lumaphone. So for him to use a light to trigger a switch on or off would have actually been a walk in the park for him. Now, as a test, I just got curious about how much heat and how close something would have to be in general to get any kind of response. So we gave it a bit of a test with some cardboard.
Whoa, that started instantly. There we go. It's changing the focus. Let's see if it helps.
Can I see smoke?
All right, I'll turn it off. I don't know which way to turn this.
Okay. What is it?
It was like 107 degrees. You just have to be on it.
The carbon arc is definitely getting a fair bit of heat into it, but before we could finish the test, this happened.
Whoa, what the hell?
So some of you may have guessed it, that was steel sparks. The carbon burnt down too far and melted the metal.
Oh no.
So I then had to go and repair that before we could give it another cardboard test. After that was done, we were back in action. So the reflector is a bit more optimised for distance rather than close range, but I focused the beam down the best that I could. I actually had no idea it was smoking at this point, but then we finally got a result.
Oh. We've got some burning.
So it looks like the carbon arc death ray can destroy, if you are standing still 1 metre from it.
That's got it. But we don't really want to start a fire, so I think I'll leave it at that.
Now, Harry's death ray was meant to be a portable weapon, with the final version to be mounted on a truck to take out an enemy in the distance or destroy a city even in a high commanding position. So we are going to test this out in the field and see how it goes for range. However, our ray needs a lot of power, and we would literally not be able to do these field tests without today's sponsor. This is the Delta 2 Max portable battery system from EcoFlow, which I'll be using to power my big old welder, and have actually used it for some of the tests in the shed already. So after this serves its death ray purposes, this unit will be perfect to replace our off-grid camping setup to run lighting in a fridge, which is currently a heavy lead acid battery and inverter. Because this has the same capacity, but is actually less than half the weight and more than double the AC output, delivering up to 2,400 watts, which can run almost any appliance you throw at it. But literally, just while testing it out for this video, my sister actually had the power cut to her house for 6 days after a switchboard burnt out, and it all had to be replaced. They'd been running generators, and when I found out, I said, hey, we have a battery that you can use, because they basically had no power through the nights because the noise and fumes just gets too much. But this battery made a huge difference for them to be able to run a fridge and a deep freezer through the night, plus have some lighting and charge phones from all of your favourite shapes of USB power. Then in the day, it can be recharged off a genset or even off something like the EcoFlow 400 watt portable solar panel. It can actually take up to 1000 watts of charging via its 2 solar input ports. But because the DeltaFlow 2 Max is very easy to move around, if you did need to top it up during an outage, you can also simply take it to someone else's house, like I did because I'm a great brother, and recharge it there. With AC alone, you can charge to about 80% in 53 minutes, or faster if you have solar plugged in at the same time. Don't miss out on EcoFlow Black Friday sales from the 12th to the 30th of November, and upcoming Boxing Day sales from December 1st through to the 12th of January. Link in the description. The night before heading out for a range test, I thought I'd give it a quick go in the backyard to confirm the focus was all looking good. And this thing is insanely bright. It now makes complete sense why people in the town near Harry's lab reported seeing strange lights flashing in the sky. I got the focus sorted, but once I started to hear neighbours come out of their house to see what was going on, I thought I'd call it a day. The following day, we loaded up the ute and headed out to a nice quiet location near a neighbouring town to see if this thing was the city destroyer it was claimed to be.
Time to burn a city. I don't think I can see any light on the other side. Surely you'd be able to see that though. That's crazy bright. Do you see any city burning?
Sure.
Make sure they all get some.
Oh, I can't even see the top of it. Hang on. Oh wow, it's like a giant lightsaber. Wow.
I see no death and destruction. You can hear some swans.
In the end, I'm still not completely sure whether he was just a confidence man with tech skills, focused more on securing investors' money rather than making a working weapon, or if he just didn't understand the limitations of the tech at that time. But I'd love to hear other people's theories. But if his device was based on a bright carbon arc lamp, technically he did in fact build a death ray. It might not destroy an enemy instantly, but ultimately with its huge amounts of invisible ultraviolet radiation, it could eventually give you skin cancer. It might not be a city destroyer, but at a minimum, I think we've definitely made a pretty cool backyard World War II searchlight. Whoa!
Oh my god.
It must have been touching. Okay, I'll just back that up a bit. Wrong knob. wrong knob. Okay.
You just gotta roll up to a village and just be like, hang on guys.
Stand here.
Don't move! I'm
focusing it still. You'll be dead in a minute. Just wait.